Hello, Mixed Nut Cases and Dog Days of Podcasting listeners. This is Nutty, and this is Dog Days of ADHD. So this has been brought upon by Mark the Encaffeinated's podcast, a couple other musings, some talking on the Facebook group, and a whole collection of people. Thank you, Gary, who's been listening, and Clinton, and Melissa, and everyone else. I think Tim even talked about it. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about ADD. Growing up took a little while, but my mother did get me diagnosed. Not that she did the diagnosing, but for her pushing for it because she had a psychology degree. She knew I was different. She knew something was different, and I needed some support and help. Finally gets me diagnosed in school. I was originally diagnosed in elementary school, and I didn't get services until middle school because they, at the time, didn't quite believe that you could have ADD and have a high IQ. Now we know that's different. We know that most people with ADD have a high IQ. Often there's also comorbidity, so you might have other issues, so it gets confusing. They never studied women with ADD, things like that. And I wanted to talk about this because a lot of adults are starting to recognize traits amongst themselves. And there's a lot of self-diagnosis going around. And that is not a bad thing because not everyone can get diagnosed. And a lot of times people think, what is the point of being diagnosed? Well, for me, the point is helping you identify what's going on and what your traits are so that you can figure out strategies to help make your life a little bit easier. I would never trade the way my brain works, but it definitely works different. The other thing is the issues I had when I was a kid are completely different than the issues that I have now. The challenges I face today are completely different. And so I think that's one of the reasons. There's two reasons, I think. When I was a kid, they used to say that you would grow out of ADD. And that is not true. You do not grow out of it. Two things happen. One, you develop coping strategies so you're able to function. And two, your challenges are different. So what you were challenged with as a child, you learn to adapt and you learn how to progress through, but there's a whole level of challenges as an adult that you were never prepared for. And nobody really talks about it, or at least they didn't. Now we're starting to talk about it. Now there's videos and there's memes and there's all sorts of things going around and people are starting to say, wait a minute, this sounds really familiar. And for me, the diagnosis means I can find out more about myself so I can help support myself. But self-diagnosis is just as good. I am in an employee resource group for neurodivergence. It's like growing something, inclusivity, neurodivergence. Anyway, people with neurodivergence. And so it's not just ADD, it's dyslexia, it's autism, it's all the other things. So that's, I would say, the majority of the people in that group are self-diagnosed because getting diagnosed as an adult is very difficult and often not a priority. And by the way, one of the big things that people with various neurodivergence, but especially ADD and ADHD have, is executive dysfunction. One of the hardest things to do is to call and make a doctor's appointment. So to try to get diagnosed is a whole other stack of issues. It's not that important, but if you are noticing certain things and you want to try some of these coping strategies, it's not going to hurt you, even if you're not. Even if maybe you aren't ADD, maybe you're just a little different, whatever. If it works for you, then that's great. If it doesn't, okay, you tried it. Try something else. Not everything's going to work for every single person, but it helps. And I think talking about it makes it easier for some. So there's a couple of, for me, telltale signs. I've often joked that if you're my friend and we're very close, we probably think similarly, and that might be why. And it's a little bit of a joke, but it's not that far from the truth, because Tech and I got really close, and he had not been diagnosed, but lo and behold, oh yes, he does have ADHD, and he gets diagnosed as an adult. Was not a shock to me. Everyone that I've really had a serious relationship with tended to be. It just happened, just by chance or just because they could handle my brain. My best friends, the people that I've been able to have long relationships with, tend to be, because they are the kind of people that if I don't call you or we don't talk for months or years at a time, the moment we see each other again, it's like there's been no time, and we pick up where we left off. I don't think that's a typical trait, and I think most people would be absolutely unable to have that kind of relationship. And I always feel guilty for not calling people and all of that. But then again, this happens because my friends forget to call me too. It's things like that. So if you think, wow, I haven't talked to Nutty in a while and she must not like me. No, it's my ADHD. It's my ADD stopping me. And I've got a lot of guilt about it too. And I feel like a really bad friend, by the way, always, all the time. But so that's why, that's one of my things. The other thing is, if you're not bothered or you don't get hyped up by caffeine, if caffeine helps you think or focus, that's usually a really big sign, because stimulants, our brains work differently, and stimulants actually help us calm down. All of the medication for ADD are stimulants because they don't work like stimulants. It works in the reverse. So, like, I can have a can of can of Diet Coke, and go right to bed. No problem. If I don't have caffeine, I'm disorganized. I have a hard time. So for me, that's my self-medication. So if that's something that you find, might be an indication. But there's a million other things. There's actually, there's a bunch of websites. If you go and you look at the list, and it'll say, if you have 6 of these things, then you're this type or whatever. That is not a full diagnosis, but it's a good starting point, a jumping off point. Understanding that is going to help you understand yourself. And the reason I'm talking about this is, well, 1, I don't think people talk about it enough, but 2, if you do think that you think differently, it's really important to know you're not wrong. You're not broken. You think differently. If we were all the same, life would be no fun. We need this kind of a difference. We need this kind of a divergence. There are some things about myself that are so frustrating, and I get so upset that why can't I just do this thing? But then there's other things that are amazing about it. And, some people might say it's a superpower. And in some ways, sure. But in other ways, it's not. But it's all who I am. So for me, it's a big part of my identity. And I'm okay with that. And I love talking about it. And I love discussing it. Because I think the more people understand, the better the world is. And I teach martial arts. And I would say more than half my students have a learning difference or special needs of some type. And I'm always telling my students that I have ADD. I tell them all sorts of things because I don't want them to think there's a stigma. And, I'll say the wrong word. Have no idea I said the wrong word. Big example is I say July instead of January all the time. Don't know why. Just one of the things that I do. There's other words, trigger words like that, but I'll do things and I'll say the complete wrong thing. And my students will look at me and they're like, did you mean that? No, I didn't. Since I meant this. Thank you. And they understand. It's how my brain works. And it's okay. You're not broken. You're not wrong. You're just different. And it's beautiful. We're all different. And if you're struggling, just know you're not alone. They always say neurodivergent, neurotypical. I don't think there is such a thing as typical. But I think our divergences, like how we're different, is so varied that we probably make up more of the population than the supposed neurotypical. So it's all good. And if you're not, if you are neurotypical, that's cool too. Like I said, we need all the colors of the rainbow, all flavors in the flavor spectrum. All of this is important. So if you want to tell me about any of your learning differences or something that's different about you, I am more than willing to talk about it, and I would love to hear about it. Till tomorrow. Nutty Bites is produced by Nimlas Studios under a Creative Commons Attribution No Commercial Non-Derivatives 3.0 International License. That means you can't change it without my permission. You can share it and send it to your friends. Just link back to me, my site, and everything. We live at nimlas.org, which has links to everything social media, including facebook.com/group/nuttybites and patreon.com/nukejoss, or call 347-NUTTY42.